Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from Entitled People. Story 1 is by Brett B. Entitled Elaine Strikes Again. It's been a while since the whole incident with my entitled neighbor Elaine. I've gotten to know 3 of my neighbors so far, and I didn't mention the Elaine incident to them because I felt like it wasn't my place to defame someone. My immediate next door neighbors, let's call them John and Carol, had a small barbecue and potluck. They invited other neighbors and I talked to many of them and started to get to know them. Overall, everyone was very friendly. Towards the end of the barbecue, Elaine came around knocking on the backyard gate with a bag of containers. She said she rang the doorbell but no one answered. Carol went towards the gate but John told her to sit down and got an angry look. He asked her if she needed anything. She said she wants to join the party and everything smells really good. John said the party is potluck and it's nearly over and about all the food is finished. Elaine asked if she could come in anyway. Carol chirped up and asked if she brought anything. Elaine said she didn't, but she's sure there's more than enough. John said it's nearly over and they're cleaning up now and she should go home. Elaine scowled and tried to open the gate while John firmly held it in place. After a few minutes of that, she went home. I asked Carol what that was all about. Carol says Elaine always invites herself to people's homes with some kind of sob story about wanting to be welcomed. She eats everything she can find and takes a lot of stuff home. She goes through the fridge and pantries, and if you tell her no for something, she gets really upset. Carol says she doesn't want to be rude to Elaine, but with the cost of food and caring for children, it's ridiculous that a woman can feel entitled to pantry and kitchen raiding on a regular basis. A neighbor named Jane said that Elaine insults people a lot casually and also invites herself to couples' date nights. Jane claims Elaine called her home inappropriate and psychotic for being too clean. A neighbor named Mary said Elaine called her 15-year-old daughter anorexic for being thinner than her specifically. The neighbors mostly agreed that Elaine is really loud and rude. She doesn't have the best social skills. Most of the neighbors don't talk to her or avoid her. Elaine also never lets anyone in her home. She says it's because of COVID. She doesn't ever bring anything to neighborhood events or anyone's home and constantly complains about being poor even though she owns her home. It's usually the husbands that have to be stern and tell her to get out and never come back when Elaine throws her tantrums. I think the husbands are tired of subsidizing her life. The husbands all complain that Elaine really tries hard to talk about her bisexuality with them and cozies up to them. I didn't share my experience with the neighbors for now, but maybe one day I will. I don't feel bad for her. I just feel like she should be kinder to people and not treat them like they exist for her convenience. She isn't entitled to other people's things. She isn't poor. She isn't struggling. Maybe we should have a conversation with her husband? What kind of person shows up to other people's homes with containers? I am so glad I don't know anybody like that. Just an absolute beggar and somebody who comes over with containers to take food from your party home with them. That is crazy. OP, I just gotta say it. I have read and heard so many entitled people stories, but this one really takes the cake. Down in the comments by Dresses212, 10,028. When you say she showed up with a bag of containers, based on what everyone said, am I right to infer that she showed up with her own containers to take the food home? Wow, your neighbors are too nice. The chutzpah for a grown woman to show up uninvited to a party with to-go containers. And going through people's refrigerators and pantries? I knew not to do that in someone else's home at about age 5. Our next story is by Skyboy789. My husband's grandmother said I'm trying to be a housewife. My husband's grandmother is old school as feck. Just so you guys know, F-E-C-K. She's Greek and, well, I'm Italian background and she would much rather me be Greek. She's awful, though. I only see her a couple times a year, but I'm almost done. One time she overheard my husband and I having a disagreement, and she said I should listen to him even if I'm wrong because I should respect my husband. Another time I was at her house and all of her adult grandchildren were getting ready to leave. They left her pillows, throws, and blankets all over the ground and unorganized. I decided to put everything back into place, and she caught me and said, "It's okay." And I said, "The last thing you should do when we leave is be cleaning. Just relax," and I continued. She laughed and said to my brother-in-law in Greek, "Look at her trying to be a good housewife." He told me because I asked him. She favors all her grandsons' Greek wives and is awful to the non-Greek ones. One time my wallet was stolen at her house and I lost $700. My husband's family told me the grandmother's sister most likely stole it because she has a history of stealing. Instead of the grandmother confronting her sister, she yelled at me for being unorganized. She thought I was unorganized because I emptied my suitcase to find my wallet and my clothes were all over the bedroom floor I was staying in at the time. And told me if I want to get married to her grandson, I should organize myself. I should mention the $709 casually left in my wallet was a lump sum of gift money I had gotten from all my family for Christmas. I don't usually carry around $700. I was going to add my own 2 cents on this, but I agree so strongly with the top comment underneath this by Nature Carolyn Gate. I laugh at these people who talk about respect. What they really mean is you should defer to the husband or defer to crazy Granny. Granny doesn't understand what the word respect means. Granny's family sounds like a circus without a tent. Sometimes old-fashioned people think that the husband is the breadwinner and the commander and everybody in his family should just bow to his whim. If he says it, it's law. That's what I find a lot of older people tend to believe. They were raised in a pretty backwards way, and most of them still cling to their old beliefs. Our next story is by Golden Silver 61. Entitled Kid Tries Sending His Police Officer Dad After Me in a Pro-Revenge Attempt. His plan backfires. From the mid-90s through the early 2000s, I spent most of my summers working as a counselor at a Boy Scout summer camp. I've worked in several different program areas, but this story happened when I was the director of the rifle range. Every week we would get a new group of campers, and when they came up to the range for orientation, I would go over all the safety rules. I would finish by telling the kids, "You all get 1 warning on this range, and this will be the warning. There are only 2 safe directions to point your rifles, up in the air or downrange. It doesn't matter if your gun is loaded or unloaded. If you break this rule and deliberately point your rifle in any other direction, you will be kicked off this range and will not be allowed to shoot here for the rest of the week." I would go over all these rules again for the kids on the first day of merit badge classes to satisfy the safety rule requirement for the badge. And there were plenty of posters hanging around the range with all the safety rules on them. In other words, there were no excuses to break them. One day, the scouts in my merit badge class were practicing shooting for the test they had to take at the end of the week. One scout, the entitled kid of this story, thought it would be funny to point his rifle at another scout and spout off some random action movie line. I ran up and snatched the rifle from his hands and yelled, "What the heck are you doing?" The entitled scout responds, But the gun wasn't loaded." Me, "Recite the safety rules, now!" The entitled scout recited them all, including the part about pointing the gun not in a safe direction. I told him to hand over his shooting ticket. I tore it in half and said he was done on my range for the rest of the week. Later that afternoon, the range was open for free shooting. Everything was going smoothly until I noticed the entitled scout walking up the trail towards the range with his father, an assistant scoutmaster who was built like an NFL linebacker. After the round of shooting ended, I called a ceasefire and told my assistant to keep an eye on the range while I handled the situation that was about to happen. As I approached the entitled scout and his father, he jumped up and down, pointed at me, and yelled, "That's him! He's the one who tore up my ticket and kicked me off the range." He looks at me and yells, "You're gonna get it now! My dad's a cop, and you're gonna be sorry for what you did." Before I could get a word out, Cop Dad gets in my face and started chewing my butt out drill sergeant style. Now, this story happened so long ago that I don't remember exactly what Cop Dad was shouting. I mostly remember the big grin the entitled scout gave me as he watched his dad tear me a new one. I just stood there quietly and patiently waiting for my turn to respond. Finally, Cop Dad said something along the lines of, "So what do you have to say for yourself?" Me, "Yes, I did tear up your son's shooting ticket and kicked him from the range. But did your son mention why I did that?" Cop Dad's face went from angry to inquisitive. He blinked in rapid succession, and he said, No, now that you mention it, he didn't tell me why." We both turned our attention to the entitled scout. His smile faded, and he shrunk in our presence as he realized that his plan had just backfired. I loved returning the same grin that he gave me a few moments earlier. To the entitled scout's credit, he did tell the truth. He probably knew better than to lie to Cop Dad. And if looks could kill, the look on Cop Dad's face would have killed his son several times over. After a moment of silence, he finally said in one of the most intimidating voices I've ever heard in my life, "Go back to camp and wait for me at your tent. I'll deal with you soon." The entitled scout left to the tune of Dead Man Walking. Cop Dad turned to me and apologized for getting angry and chewing my butt out before knowing all the facts, to which I accepted his apology. For the rest of the week, Cop Dad would come to the range every day during an open shoot my rifles, and would hang out and talk with me. Turned out he was actually a pretty cool guy. At the end of the week, he told me that when they get home, he will finish his son's rifle shooting merit badge, and he'll make sure that his son never disrespects a firearm ever again. I love it when a parent comes up all mad and angry and they turn out to be a good person. That doesn't happen very often. Usually they just side with their kid because they think their kids are infallible little angels. Cop Dad is obviously a good dad. And I'm hoping that he'll have some sort of punishment for his son that makes him really understand why what he did was dangerous. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a great day.